Welcome to the second part of our ePortfolio introduction. In this video, we're going to focus on the anatomy of our ePortfolio, as well as some key terms that we want to better understand as we walk through this particular process and project. To prepare for this particular lesson, please make sure you have any materials that you might need in order to take notes throughout the video. You'll be using the information from this video throughout the ePortfolio process, so it'll be important for you to jot down some of the key terms and ideas in this video so that you can apply those things in the design of your ePortfolio. This is the second video in a series of 4 designed to give you an introduction to the project overall, but then to begin helping you develop the ePortfolio using our open access platform called Wix. In video 2, which is the one that you're currently watching, we're going to dive into the ePortfolio or the anatomy of the ePortfolio. And our guiding questions for this particular video include, what does our ePortfolio include? And what are some key terms we need to understand for the ePortfolio project? To begin, when we think about going to a website, one of the first things, or the first thing that we encounter is something called the home page. And the home page is meant to be a landing page for new and returning visitors. And if you think of it in a way as an introduction, for example, if you take a look at the home page for our course in Canvas, you'll see that the information on that page provides you with things like what my email might be, what the name of our course is, where you can find certain information, links to some of the resources that we might use, as well as a menu to navigate you to things like the modules where our content is held and your grades. So it is a landing page or something that allows your audience to get introduced to the website. When we think about the home page for our ePortfolio, we want to look at it as a way to begin building our identity. And as such, we want to think about what the purpose of the home page might be. We want to look at it as a way to engage our audience in their first interaction with you as the composer, as the developer, and as the subject of the ePortfolio in a way that invites them to move further into your ePortfolio. So that home page should be meant to really invite the audience in while giving them some introductory information about you, which means that we want to consider what elements or information and how you want that information displayed on your homepage of your ePortfolio. The other thing we want to always consider is why. Why are we putting certain pieces of information or certain elements on our ePortfolio? We want to trace it back to the audience that we're composing this for in every instance. So let's take a look at the homepage of this particular ePortfolio and recognize some of the elements that he has chosen to put on it. We see that he's included his name, but he's also included a less formal way to address his audience with his name. In other words, he says, "Hello, I'm Fred Homan," almost in a conversational sense. We see that he's got several elements that help to provide us with a little bit about him. For example, we see in that first part that he's a student. We see where he is currently going to school and what he is currently focused on. Now, he doesn't give us this long biography, right? He gives us snippets, but then he provides us with links that we might use in order to go find out more if we wanted to. In that second chunk, we see that he talks about his research. And then in the third one, we see that he gives us those different elements about where he's worked in the past. And then underneath his image, we see that he gives us his contact information. He utilizes images in a way to personalize, but also to provide communication because he strategically uses the logos from the different companies he's worked for, because he knows that it draws our eyes to the familiar logos even before we see the name of the company. He gives us links. So we understand as web users that when we see the different color, or if it were underlined, that that is a link that will take us somewhere else. He gives us his contact information, and he's choosing to not only give us, let's say, an email, but he's choosing also to engage us in his social media. There's a way to navigate to his different artifacts. We're going to see that in just a minute, which means that on his homepage, what you see are choices. He gives us choices of how we want to interact with him without giving us every piece of detail in this long text on a homepage, because he knows that when we go to a website, that's not what we're expecting. So let's take a look at his website real quick. We see that on his homepage, we've got things like links. So if I were to click on that, because I don't know what that particular college or school does or his focus is, I can go to that website and engage with it. We also see that he's giving us a choice of interacting with his resume. So if I wanted to, I could go to his resume and I could see all of the different areas of research that he's done, publishings that he's done in order to get to know him. But he didn't put this on the homepage because he knows that our audience is probably not going to scroll through all of that information. The homepage is meant to give us an opportunity to get to know him a little bit, get to know us a little bit, but then provide ways that we can move through different artifacts. When we think about artifacts, the artifacts for our ePortfolio will be the essays that we write, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. So I want you to think about the fact that we will have a homepage, and then you will have artifacts. His artifacts include the different research that he's done, and he's included them in these boxes. But again, he's giving us different choices. We can click on this page and go to that artifact and scroll through. And then if we get to the bottom and we want to know even more, we can go to the actual article or PDF. We can go to a video. We can go to the project link. There's even a demo. So even in his artifacts, he gives us choices for how we want to interact with it. Let's walk back to this. So the first thing we're going to consider when we start looking at or composing is going to be to develop our homepage. And that's the goal after these first 4 videos. But let's consider this. After seeing that ePortfolio and also seeing other websites, we want to think about how an ePortfolio communicates to its audience. And for that, we want to understand some key terms. The first of which is called mode. Mode of communication. Mode is simply a means of communication, and as you see in our infographic, we are including 5 modes in this conversation. The first mode we'll talk about is linguistic. This refers to written or spoken words. This includes word choice, the delivery of written or spoken text, the organization of words into sentences and paragraphs, and the development and coherence of words and ideas. We also have visual. This refers to images and characters that people see. This mode includes color, layout, style, size, and perspective. This includes aural, which is focused on sound, including but not limited to music, sound effects, ambient noises, silence, tone of voice in spoken language, volume of sound, emphasis and accent. We also have gestural, which refers to the way movement is interpreted. This includes things like facial expression, hand gestures, body language, and interaction between people are all gestural modes. And then we have spatial. This refers to the physical arrangement, organization, and proximity of the text and images. This can also refer to the navigation bar on a website and how a user interprets and navigates the web. While we have been able to define these five, we use them all the time, perhaps without even realizing it. The next concept we want to look at is the medium, or for plural, media. This simply means the channel or system through which communications are conveyed. So for example, if we want to communicate in a linguistic mode, we might choose the medium of print, similar to the essays that you just submitted. If we want to communicate in the oral mode, we might choose the medium of a podcast. So print and podcast are both examples of mediums. The ePortfolio will be using the medium of a website in order to communicate through the modes of linguistic, of oral, of visual, of spatial, and gestural. Which brings us to the idea of multimodality. Multimodality is simply a way of stating that most of the time we use several modes to create communication. If you think about it, when you have a conversation face to face with somebody, yes, you are speaking to them, so you have the linguistic mode, but you're also using gestures and body language and facial expressions. So we've got gestural in there. Spatial, where are you in relation to the person you're having the conversation with? Are you sitting at a table? Are you face to face? Are you really close? Are you kind of far away? You also have the visual because you're interpreting the gestural modes of the body language that you're doing. So you can see even in a simple conversation, you're using all of the different modes in one space. But when we think about the modes, each of them does a specific thing when you communicate. Multimodality, or the concept of, can tell us what modes are being used. In other words, we can dissect the different modes in a different type of communication, but it can't tell us about the difference in style, and it has no means to tell us what that difference might mean. In other words, multimodality can tell us that we are using these three modes in this particular instance, but it can't tell us what it means. That's up to us. So we have to think about how we interpret those modes. And if we understand how our audience might interpret the modes, it helps us to better design our ePortfolio. Speaking of modes, let's take a look at this quick meme example. And if you have no understanding or haven't heard the word Covfefe before, I'd encourage you to stop the video for just a minute. Go ahead and Google that just to get some context of the word Covfefe. So we see a meme. We're familiar with them. We see them all the time. They've been around forever. Especially now in the digital age, we see memes used and produced often and immediately after something might happen in pop culture or in the news, which references the one we're looking at right here. But if you look at this particular meme and you ask what modes of communication we are using or they are using in this meme, you can see that for the most part, they use all of them except one, oral. So we have linguistic because we have text on top of an image. So we've got text there. We have visual because we see that it's an image, and then you have different elements in the image. We have gestural because you notice that the way in which the characters are drawn or produced on the image or the background of the water is they are communicating something with, let's say, their eyes, the shape of their mouth, perhaps the way they're facing each other. You see that Patrick's looks like he's either rolling his eyes, maybe in response to something SpongeBob said, or he's just thinking really hard. You see SpongeBob looking over as if maybe he just said something silly, which might give us the text that's layered on top. But we have this context of SpongeBob. You may be familiar with the cartoon. This brings an element of connection into the meme, and then you have the text that lays on top of it, which is in reference to a tweet done by President Trump back in 2017, and it was actually a misspelling. He meant to type the word coverage and instead said Covfefe. and the text was up just long enough for millions of people to interact with it and then begin to produce these memes that are meant to be funny. The reference here is that Kafifi has been turned into a verb. You see that they're conjugating that verb in this particular text. So it's these modes put together, and our understanding of those modes is what gives this meme its meaning and our interaction with it. So now we want to turn to how a particular composer might put together these different modes or these elements. And this brings us to the four basic design principles. The first one being contrast. Contrast is often the most important visual attraction on a page. It's what makes a reader look at the page in the first place. It also clarifies the communication. Repetition means to repeat the visual elements of the design throughout the piece. You can repeat colors, shapes, textures, spatial relationships, line thicknesses, fonts, sizes, graphic concepts. This develops the organization and strengthens the unity, allows your audience to understand or get to know your portfolio or the website in a way that they can easily move through the spaces. Alignment. Nothing should be placed on the page arbitrarily. Every element should have some visual connection with another element on the page. This creates a clean and sophisticated look. And then, of course, proximity, that you put items relating to each other together or close together. And when several items are in close proximity to each other, they become one visual unit rather than several separate units, which creates cohesiveness and organization for your audience. This helps organize the information or reduces clutter and gives the readers a clear structure of your portfolio. And you'll notice this when you interact with any website. And it's not until you see a bad design that perhaps we take these for granted. And it's no coincidence that if you looked at these four design elements and you took the first letter of each word, yes, it is the acronym CRAP. So you can say that you learned about design CRAP in this video. So let's walk back to this particular portfolio just for a minute and see if those design elements play a role in this. The first one being contrast, and we can easily see that there's a lot of contrast here because he's chosen to use a white background and put the black text on a page. But even in his image, the image that he chose has a lot of contrasting colors to the white. But he's also decided that the background with the blue, he's matched it up with the links so that you have this cohesive look with the black and white and just a little bit of blue. And then, of course, he's got his logos there. What about repetition? Let's take a look at his artifacts for just a minute and the way he's decided to design or put them on his homepage. What do we notice is repeating? Well, in each of the packets of artifacts, we notice that they follow a similar pattern where they have an image, they have a title, tiny bit of description, and then different ways that you can interact with them. Each of the artifacts follows this same pattern so that if I interact with one, I know how to interact with all of them. And Henry's added a little bit extra of bringing it off the screen a little bit when my mouse goes over it so that I, as the audience, knows that that's the one I'm about to click on. So he creates this repetition of elements so that the audience can quickly learn and understand how to navigate his website because he knows that you don't want to guess where to go or how to do it. He wants his audience to go into these different projects very easily because if they can't easily get to it or access it, they probably are not going to spend a lot of time on his portfolio. Let's take a look at alignment for just a minute. And you see that one, if you notice, all of his elements are in close proximity to each other here on this front part with a lot of white space on the sides. And you might ask yourself, gosh, that's a lot of white space, but what does it do? It draws our eyes right here in the middle and helps us focus. And then we see that he has lined his text up on the left-hand side. We also notice that his image lines up with the top of the text here, and he's purposely put his name a little bit higher, a little bigger of a font, and has bolded it. We even see that when he uses the logos in the different companies that he's had an opportunity to work with, he creates a similar size and lines them up. Same thing in his artifacts. We see that these boxes are all the same size, they line up, so they're visually pleasing. We see that even the text, each piece lines up with the next. These lines that are drawn underneath the images are all exactly in the same place in order to provide that cohesiveness. So when we start thinking about our homepage, you're going to think about a couple of things. You're going to think about um, what elements that you would like on this particular page and how you want to arrange or display them, keeping in mind the different design elements that we just discussed. So as you move through these 4 videos, the next thing you're going to do after completing this particular video is to submit or complete the brief reflection assignment based on video number 2, and then move into video number 3, which is going to introduce you to the open access web platform that we will use for this project. As always, thank you for watching, and remember that you can refer to this video as many times as you need to get the information, especially with regards to those key terms that we're going to be using throughout. So you'll hear me reference those throughout the next set of videos that we will use to apply those different pieces. You can now head back to Canvas to continue in this week's module, and thank you.